So now let's talk a little bit about note-taking. Well, for note-taking, of course, we're going to need a pencil or a pen and a piece of paper. We need to use this piece of paper wisely. In other words, we're going to try to use one side of this paper so we don't have to be flipping back and forth the paper when we have to, for example, see some notes that we had taken previously that we might be able to use again. Now, when we take notes, there's a big dilemma on whether we should take the notes in the source language or in the target language. Well, it really is basically up to you. Whatever is easier for you works. That perhaps is one of the key statements in consecutive interpreting. If it works for you, it's good enough. And I personally try to take my notes in the source language because I want to avoid trying to do a double task of concentrating on the message and translating at the same time. But sometimes if you take your notes, for example, in the English language, your notes can be significantly reduced because English, of course, contains less words. Now, what type of words do we write down? Well, words that will trigger your memory, and yet that usually comes down to verbs and nouns, as we saw in the previous example. Now, other things that we have to write down is names, numbers, addresses, and any other type of non-contextual information. Now, that can get very, very lengthy, and that's why it's always recommended that we have our own set of symbols. So in the next slide, in our next slides, we'll have some symbols that we will suggest for you to use that might be of great help. Remember, symbols, or these symbols that I am going to suggest here, are just as an aid. You do not have to use all these symbols. You do not have to give them the representation that I have given them. It's all up to you. These symbols can be personalized, and as a matter of fact, it is suggested that you personalize these symbols. These are all just suggestions. Now, I'm starting with the mathematical symbols basically because they are of daily use and they're very familiar to us. Now, here we have the number symbol that can be used to represent number, the minus symbol, minus, less, the more, or the addition symbol. Now, these symbols can be used both as nouns, verbs, and perhaps even adjectives. So we're going down the list and we see the equal symbol, the divided symbol. For example, we can say James and Mary separated. We can use J divided Jane, James and Jane, J division J, less than, more than. Here we continue down the list. We have some more symbols, the times, the more or less, the different, the number sign. I'm sorry, the money sign, which we can see here that we can use as a verb and as a noun. We have change, percentage. These arrows are very handy because they can briefly be written down, and we go down the list. We have before, after, up, down, increase, decrease, conditional, okay, the if and only if, the conditional, and then we have the two arrows clashing, which we can represent as a crash, two cars crashing, or even a conflict. Here we have the question sign, the upset sign, the prescription sign, the little heart can be represented as to love or to like. Happy, sad, the okay, the man and the woman. Here it's important to point out that there are many symbols out there that are very handy that are not included here that can also be used, but we don't want to fill our brain with symbols because sometimes it can be, like we said before, a hindrance to have too many symbols. Now, if it's always good to have symbols because an image or a symbol can represent many words, and it's a good trigger for our memory. Continuing with our symbols, we have some that are not as common, but that are also going to be used a lot in consecutive. We have the connector and, the little check mark, the with and without. Now this W, which represents here work for us, can represent many things, but we can choose a set of letters in the alphabet that can represent words that we use a lot in whatever setting that we have, whether it be court, medical. So it's important to choose, like I said before, our own little set of symbols. For example, the lambda, we chose it here as a person, and the quotation marks as conversations or the verb talk.